Okay, we're gonna not show that. Hey, Rainbow here, and welcome to my channel. Today's guest, yes, guest ride is going to be the Ducati Supersport 950S. Now, the 950S is about $3,000 more than the regular 950, probably because of the suspension, but let's get into it right now. Oh, there she is, and it's gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. This is the 2023 Ducati Supersport 950, and this one happens to be the 950S, which has a little bit more to it, but mostly, really just from what I know, in suspension and in suspension only. Now, this is basically Ducati's answer for a road sports bike, all right? This is what they believe has its own market above and beyond, for example, like the Panigale, because it's a more comfortable riding position, therefore it's for the road. Now, they intentionally set up these fairings on this bike to kind of look very similar, and it's really based off the Panigale V4. Now, the regular 950 goes in the US for $15,195 for this bike. This particular model starts at $18,095, and that is for the 950S, which, as you can tell by the colors, it's because of all that Öhlins suspension. So of course you're going to pay more for the Öhlins, but the 950 comes with a darn good suspension anyway. It has Marzocchi forks in the front and Sachs monoshock in the back. This thing is powered by this thing right here, which is a 937cc Testastretta L-Twin. All right. Now, this 937 Testastretta L-Twin does not need a valve clearance inspection until 18,000 miles or 30,000 kilometers. Let's talk about power. All right. Pretty powerful bike. All right. Let's see. 110 horsepower at 9,000 RPM. That is very respectable for this type of bike. So let's talk the torque that drives this rear wheel. About 93 Newton meters, otherwise known as 69 pound-feet of torque, and that's at 6,500 RPM. Now, the bike is not necessarily light. I think it's probably average. The dry weight's 184 kilograms, or about 405 pounds. The curb weight on this bike is 210 kilograms, or 463 pounds. Seat height is pretty average here at about 810 millimeters or 31.9 inches. We'll talk about that more once I get this thing on the road. Okay, so safety-wise, this thing does come with 3 different riding modes. We'll talk about them shortly. It does have the ABS Bosch front and rear cornering ABS on this. It does come with traction control, wheelie control, all of the Ducati EVO type. Now, don't ask me what range you're going to get out of this tank, but this holds about 4.2 US gallons, or about 16 liters of fuel. You're probably noticing that quick shifter setup on there. This is a 6-speed gearbox, 1 down, 5 up, and the Ducati quick shifter is both up and down. Engine and gearbox has a slipper and self-servo wet clutch on it. And let's talk about the frame. This is a tubular trellis frame, if you can't see, and the frame is attached to both of the cylinder heads. Now, this is the S model, so you are looking at the front forks on here that are 48 millimeter, nice and beefy 48 millimeter Öhlins, and guess what? They are fully adjustable. While we're on the front, let's just continue. This has a 3.5 by 17-inch wheel on it, and on that they mount the Pirelli Diablo Rosso 3, Rosso 3, the 120/70 ZR17, probably the most common motorcycle tire out there. And there's the brakes. There's the name right there, Brembo. It has dual Brembo brakes at 320 millimeter discs, one on each side. Now on the back, we are looking at a fully adjustable Öhlins monoshock. As you can see right in there, it is a fully adjustable monoshock. On the back, on this gorgeous single-sided swing arm, we have mounted a 5.5 by 17-inch wheel that they put on the Pirelli Diablo Rosso 3 180/55 ZR17. All right, and it's a nice little Brembo single on the back. We have a decent amount of suspension travel on this bike that I forgot to mention, and that's about 5.1 inches or 130 millimeters of travel in the front and 5.7 inches or 144 millimeters of travel on that rear suspension. It has a fully colorful TFT display on the front, very typical Ducati, nothing really fancy on here, nothing like the well, it's not like the Multistrada, it's more towards the Panigale Street Fighter type. And it does have 3 different modes on this bike. Could you guess what those 3 modes are? So the 3 riding modes on this bike are Sport, which is what I'm gonna ride it in today, Touring, typical for Ducati, and Urban mode. I would equate Urban mode more or less to like a rain mode. So if you're wondering what the big changes are on this model from all the previous, the answer is really not much. And we talk about the suspension. That's why this is $2,900 more. You're paying essentially for that Öhlins suspension for about $3,000 installed from the factory. So all this is well and good, but I think the most important part is that we take this bike for a ride and see how it handles, how it feels, what kind of vibration we have. It's been about 2 years since I've been on one of these Super Sports, and the one thing that I absolutely remember was that those mirrors right there, man, they really like to vibrate. Let's see what happens. So here's a question I have for everyone that's still paying attention here. Why do they not have the Super Sport V2 version yet? Why are they still using the 937cc that they're calling the 950? Why is that? Why has this bike, which is supposed to look similar to the Panigales, but yet be the road sport bike, why hasn't this taken on the V2 name yet? What are your thoughts? How about commenting below? Okay, let's go for a spin. Like I said, I'm going to take this thing for a spin in sport mode. So let's turn it on. We're in neutral. Oh, you know what? I do need to adjust this clutch for me because I use 2 fingers like this and I need it out as far as it can go. There we go. Perfect. A little bit on here too. All right, there we go. There's that full display. Of course, you hear what it sounds like when it starts up. Well, it sounds good for this L Twin. All right, here we go. Well, let's talk seating. It feels really comfortable. You are in a forward position. It is a Super Sport bike, and overall, it's comfortable. Now, let's take this thing to a stop. I have a 32-inch inseam, and I am easily flat-footed on this bike. Easily flat-footed with my knees bent. If that helps you. 32-inch inseam, about 5'11" and a half. But a pretty comfortable position. It's really not all that aggressive. And I think a lot of that has to do with the placement of the pegs and your controls. Your foot controls seem to be relatively more mid and less to the rear, so it's not as aggressive. You're just not in that very much of an aggressive position, which is good, because one of the things that I believe that this bike accomplishes is that
maybe the people like me who are getting a little older and love sport bikes but don't necessarily want to be in that kind of a position, I think it helps us out tremendously, and it's really a nice little niche in the market here for us because it gives us a sporty feel, a sporty suspension, a sporty engine, yet at the same time gives us a little more comfortable position. Let's take it on the road and see how it feels. Looks like it has plenty of get up and go. I'm gonna say it's not a very torquey motorcycle. I mean, once you come off of like something like the Thruxton, which I reviewed last week, and get onto this, you realize that maybe the speed on this bike is a little bit more on the top end, and it's got some grunt and it has a little bit of torque, but it doesn't seem to be over torquey, which is making it, for sport mode, as far as the fueling and the torque, it seems pretty reasonable to where you don't think that the bike is going to get away on you. So even in sport mode, I'm kind of surprised that the bike isn't very jumpy, and it's pretty smooth. How are you? Amazing. So the bike has pretty good acceleration, and I've been on bikes that are more flickable, but I think that this bike, it feels sort of track focused, like you can really, you just aim where you want it to go, and it seems to be pretty good. It's not, again, all that flickable like other bikes, but it seems to be like a precise bike, if that makes any sense to you. All right, let's test some acceleration. Okay, that's impressive. I mean, it's a 937, it's almost a liter bike. It is an L twin, but it's pretty reasonable. Not too bad. More than you'll ever need on any road conditions. Do I think that this might be a decent track bike? Yeah, well, I think Ducati is kind of leaning towards that. It's saying, hey, it's a reasonably priced bike. It's a road sport bike, something that you can take on the road, be more comfortable, and yet you can take it to the track and enjoy it, especially with the safety features in here, like the traction control, the cornering ABS, and the different ride modes, and the way it's set up with the clearances. Now, I don't know what Ducati has done, but the mirrors are nowhere near as vibration bad as they were in the past. They seem to be pretty decent. There's obviously better mirror systems out there that work really well with very little to no vibration. These have a little bit in them, but it's not too bad at all. Time to try it on the highway. All right, at 80 miles an hour, you can feel the wind, but it feels pretty decent. It's actually not too bad, and at this speed, the bike is flickable. There's a decent amount of engine braking, which is not adjustable on this bike. There's no adjustment for engine braking, and fourth gear, it's not bad. It's definitely heavier in like some of the bigger bikes, but it's overall not too shabby. Okay, so tucking in, I think the wind is pretty decent, and even right now I'm doing like 89 miles an hour and I'm somewhat sitting up in this position, and I feel pretty comfortable. The wind seems to be pretty good, so the wind protection here isn't bad. The bike seems to be pretty smooth. Going through traffic, the bike appears to be easily seen. I had somebody who was going to start drifting, but I guess with the red and the fact that this is not a really small bike and I have the headlights on, they were able to see me. I've had problems with other bikes such as the RC390 where I just don't think I'm seen, and when I had my Indian Scout Bobber, it's such a low bike, you have a tendency to be ignored by drivers because you are just so low, they don't see you. So a little bit of a taller bike, you know, or brighter color, I'm going to say that it's a little safer. Now, is this bike hot? Well, I've sat at a couple lights now and I'm not baking like I would have been in the past, and it is like 91 degrees out today. And I might take back some of my comments about the mirrors. They do vibrate pretty good. It depends what speed and what gear you're in, of course. On the highway, they didn't seem too bad. Okay, time to test out the railroad tracks at about 50 miles an hour. 50-ish. And with the suspension on here, especially with the Öhlins, the fact that I have really good travel, 5.1 in the front, 5.7 in the back, I have a feeling I'm going to have a really good experience. Yeah, that took those railroad tracks very easily, and it was extremely smooth. Didn't feel like the front end getting ripped out or anything. Felt actually excellent. So kudos on the suspension, but for an extra $3,000 for this one, I'm going to expect better on the suspension. The mid-range on this bike, I'm going to say, is lacking. I might get some heat, you know, from Ducati about this, but I don't really care. I have to be honest with all my reviews. The mid-range is kind of lackluster on this bike. And overall, I truly believe that they would benefit from converting this to the V2. I mean, they could start changing some of they can start saving on engines, for crying out loud, that they have to produce. And I think that this in a V2 version would really be hitting the sweet spot. But at that point, if they're going to do that, maybe their marketing is, hey, we don't want to do that because we're going to take away from Panigale V2 sales. You know, I don't know that that's true, because they are different riding positions. You know, you can look at it many different ways. Again, pretty decent engine braking. Not bad. Not bad acceleration. I just, for some reason, was expecting a little bit more on this. Now, I think the gears are pretty long on this bike. They're not short gears. Certainly first gear and second gear are a little bit longer than what I'm used to on the Multistrada, or at least first gear anyway, which is, I guess, a good thing. And you don't have to hit 6th gear on this until you're already past most speed limits. Okay, now who is this bike for? Well, I think this bike is for the person who wants a more comfortable riding bike yet loves the look of the sports bike, loves the feel of the sports bike, loves the handling of a sports bike, but maybe just doesn't want to have those really low clip-ons where you're down in this lower position, kind of killing your lower back. That's who I think this bike is for. Do I think this bike is for the beginner? Absolutely not. It has enough testicles to it to really push hard. Although the mid-range is a little lackluster, and I said it before, this would be the third time, I don't know why they don't have a V2 version of this bike. I really don't. Because for this kind of weight of this bike, I'm not 100% happy with this 937. Now, could it be pushed a little harder? Yes, when it has some miles underneath it. Could you do something with exhaust and a tune? Yes, you could. But right out of the box, my expectations really weren't met with this bike overall. I think it's a fun bike. I think it has a lot of growth potential if you want to start turning it into like a track bike or start tricking it out and start doing all kind of stuff to it. I think that's great, but at this point it's just not my cup of tea. It's a nice bike, and they really haven't made a lot of changes over the last few bikes that they've come out, 20, 21, 22, 23. There really hasn't been a lot of changes with this bike, anything significant that would wow the customer. It's a high quality bike. It's a Ducati. Just not my cup of tea. So to be quite honest with you, I think this is a really niche market for people who just don't like the positioning of a true sports bike but want a sports bike. So this sort of meets in the middle for the most part. Yeah, it gets the front end up off the ground pretty easy. So it has the torque, you know, in that first gear, but once you get past that, I'm not quite as impressed with the bike. So anyway, as always, I'd like to thank Ian from Two Wheels World, which I'm heading into now. I always appreciate the fact that Ducati Forza, Two Wheels World, and Ian, my salesman, lets me ride these bikes, lets me take them out and give an honest opinion. And of course, my opinion on this one is good, it's favorable, but I think this is the one time that Ducati kind of disappointed me a little bit, and I think you can do better with this bike. Anyway, this is Rainbow. Please like, please subscribe. I appreciate it. Thank you very much, and have a good day. Bye-bye.